we dive into historical events to help you relax and prepare for sleep. Don't forget to show support and appreciate our story, as by the end, you'll be fast asleep. Close your eyes and let's begin. At the heart of Mesopotamia, along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, lay a city once seen as a symbol of both greatness and depravity. For some, it represented untold wealth and luxury, while for others it embodied pride and the downfall of humanity. Its walls appeared impenetrable, towers stretched toward the heavens, and the famous Hanging Gardens became one of the seven wonders of the world, granting Babylon eternal glory. This was a city where reality intertwined with myths, and historical events turned into legends. Today we view it not just as another ancient vanished city, but as a symbol of an entire civilization. Babylon entered mythology and religious texts, leaving a mark in biblical narratives and the cultural memory of humanity. Its image combined wealth and sin, luxury and destruction, dreams and punishments. We will journey through Babylon's history and see how a small city by two rivers became a symbol of a whole civilization. About 4000 BCE, the fertile valley between the two great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, became the cradle of one of the first civilizations on Earth. Here, among swamps and reed beds, people mastered agriculture, created simple irrigation channels, and founded the first settlements. The earliest inhabitants of this region were the Sumerians, a mysterious people whose origins remain debated. They were the first to build significant cities like Ur, Uruk, Lagash, and Kish. Each of these cities functioned as an independent state with its own territory, rulers, armies, and temples dedicated to the gods who protected their people. The Sumerians developed the first writing system, cuneiform, which emerged around 3200 BCE alongside Egyptian writing. They created complex astronomical calendars and the first written laws. In the northern and central areas of Mesopotamia, the Akkadians, Semitic tribes speaking a language related to ancient Hebrew and Arabic, also settled. The Akkadians gradually adopted the cultural achievements of the Sumerians, adapting them to their traditions. Over time, these two cultures merged to form the Mesopotamian civilization, which eventually laid the foundation for Babylon. Babylon likely existed as a small settlement long before 2000 BCE, but around that time, it began to stand out among neighboring cities and became an independent political unit. Initially, it was an unremarkable town surrounded by fields and swamps, among many similar settlements, each struggling for survival amid constant conflicts and raids. The people of Babylon led simple lives, farming, crafting, and trading with other cities. They worshipped the same gods as the Sumerians, but called them by their own names. The temple occupied a central place in the city's life, where rituals and sacrifices were regularly performed to ensure the gods' favor and a good harvest. The Babylonians spoke a dialect of Akkadian and used Sumerian cuneiform, although the Sumerian language gradually faded from daily use, remaining only as a sacred language for religious ceremonies, much like Latin in the Middle Ages. In everyday life, people used the Akkadian variant of cuneiform. Surviving documents from that time reveal what life was like for the early Babylonians. These were economic reports, merchants' letters, marriage contracts, and sales agreements that indicated an active economic and social life in the city. In its early years, Babylon was under the influence of stronger city-states with greater political and military power. The Babylonians had to navigate between powerful neighbors, striving to maintain neutrality and caution. However, thanks to its favorable geographic position at the crossroads of trade routes connecting the north and south of Mesopotamia, the city gradually grew rich and gained influence. Traders began stopping more frequently in Babylon, turning it into an important regional trading center. As a result, Babylon began to expand and develop, with its true prosperity starting in the 15th century BCE. when a person who would forever change the city's fate came to power: Hammurabi. This ruler became a symbol of Babylon's first great flourishing. When Hammurabi inherited the throne around 1792 BCE, Babylon was already a notable city among the states of Mesopotamia, although it wasn't the region's center. It remained one of many cities involved in conflicts over control of fertile lands and trade routes. Hammurabi proved to be a wise and cunning ruler, as well as a talented military leader. He quickly realized that for prosperity, he needed to unite the small cities of southern Mesopotamia and end the endless clashes. Over several decades, he waged successful wars and conducted diplomatic negotiations with neighbors. Gradually, he conquered rival cities and regions using either diplomatic maneuvers or force. By the middle of his reign, Hammurabi managed to unify much of Mesopotamia and create a powerful state, with Babylon as its center. He transformed the city from a regional hub into a true capital of a major empire. Under Hammurabi, Babylon began to thrive, adorned with massive walls, majestic palaces and temples, as well as markets and squares teeming with trade and public activities. The ruler's court gathered the most talented and educated people of the time: scholars, priests, scribes, merchants, and architects. Hammurabi understood that effectively managing a large empire was impossible without clear and comprehensible laws. He aimed to make his empire not only strong, but also just. Thus, he commissioned the compilation of one of the first known legal codes, which became known as the Laws of Hammurabi. This code was engraved on a massive stone stele and placed in the center of Babylon for all to see and understand the rules by which society was to be governed. The Laws of Hammurabi consisted of 282 articles covering almost every aspect of life, from trade and family matters to crimes and punishments. They clearly outlined citizens' responsibilities to the state and to one another, as well as specifying penalties for various offenses. The principle of talion, known as the law of retaliation, stated, "An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth." While it might seem harsh today, it represented an attempt to make punishments proportional to the crimes committed at that time. The laws protected property rights, established rules for marriage and inheritance, and outlined how trade and lending should be conducted, strictly defining builders' responsibilities. For instance, if a constructed house collapsed and killed its owner, the architect faced execution. Moreover, if the collapse resulted in the death of the owner's son, the builder's son would be punished. While this may seem excessive, such practices fostered a high level of responsibility and care in construction. The laws of Hammurabi also reflected the harsh realities of their time, establishing inequality among social classes. They clearly distinguished between free people, freedmen, and slaves. For instance, if a free person lost an eye, the punishment was an eye for an eye, whereas for similar harm done to a slave, the offender only had to pay a monetary fine. This disparity in punishments was common in that era, emphasizing a strict social hierarchy. The system of slavery was also detailed in Hammurabi's laws. Slaves played a significant role in Babylon's economy and daily life, primarily sourced from military campaigns. Captured enemies often became slaves. Additionally, there was debt slavery. A person who couldn't repay a debt temporarily became dependent on the creditor, but could regain their freedom after 3 years. Children of slaves, or those forced to sell themselves and their families to survive tough times, could also end up in slavery. Exceptional cases of free individuals becoming slaves for serious crimes did occur, but these were rare. Although Babylon's slavery system was brutal, it had clear legal frameworks established by Hammurabi himself. The laws included harsh penalties. Death could be imposed for theft, false accusations, witchcraft, adultery, or a slave's escape. There was also a principle of collective responsibility, where punishment for serious offenses could extend to a person's family. Hammurabi's laws were not only clear and precise, but also reflected the harsh realities of life in ancient Mesopotamia. Thanks to Hammurabi and his code, Babylon became a model of an organized and stable state, uniting disparate peoples of southern Mesopotamia. Another significant milestone of the era was the rise of the cult of the god Marduk. During this period, Marduk became the chief deity of Babylon, although he hadn't held a dominant position among local gods until then. The roots of Marduk's cult lay in Babylonian traditions, formed based on older Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs. Under Hammurabi, Marduk was proclaimed the patron of Babylon, and the king asserted that he derived his power from this god's will. This decision held both religious and political significance, allowing diverse territories and tribes to unite under a single religious foundation and strengthen central authority. Babylonians depicted Marduk as a powerful warrior, armed with a battle bow and lightning bolts, symbolizing his strength. Under Hammurabi, Marduk's priests began gaining influence. Although initially lacking significant political power, they acquired privileges during this reign and became active participants in state affairs. In the following centuries, the priesthood would emerge as a key political force capable of influencing the fate of kings and the nation. Hammurabi's era marked an important stage in the rise of Marduk's cult, which later became a central figure in Babylon's religious and political life. We'll explore details about the culture and mythology, as well as other gods and their interactions, later when discussing Babylon's Golden Age. Hammurabi's death marked the beginning of difficult trials for his state. Severely weakened and unstable, it quickly fell victim to internal conflicts. The heirs of the great king proved weak and inexperienced, and the empire built on Hammurabi's authority and charisma began to disintegrate. After his death, many cities and regions revolted, striving to regain independence, leading to endless wars and rebellions that gradually weakened Babylon. In this decline, the city became vulnerable to external threats. Around 1595 BCE, Babylon faced an attack from the Hittite army led by King Murshili. This invasion came as a complete surprise, occurring suddenly and swiftly. The Hittites, known for their war chariots, managed to cover great distances and catch the city off guard. They destroyed palaces, looted temples, and left chaos and devastation in their wake. Although the Hittites didn't stay long, the damage from their attack was catastrophic, and Babylon could never regain its former power. After this, the city fell into the hands of the Kassites, warlike tribes from the east that replaced the local rulers. Their origins remain unclear, and they were unrelated to the Sumerians or Akkadians. Modern scholars suggest that the Kassites may have been distant ancestors of the peoples who later settled in western Iran and surrounding areas. Unlike the Hittites, the Kassites didn't resort to sudden attacks and destruction. Their arrival in Babylon occurred gradually and with minimal conflict. Historians often describe this period as a peaceful occupation, as the Kassites didn't seek to eradicate local customs and culture. On the contrary, Kassite rulers aimed to integrate into Mesopotamian civilization, adopting the language, traditions, beliefs, and many governance aspects characteristic of Babylon. During this time, the city began to recover from the calamities it had endured. Kassite monarchs called themselves kings of Babylon, emphasizing their respect for the traditions and history of the conquered region. They actively restored temples and public buildings, supported priests and scholars, and facilitated the development of arts and crafts. Babylonian priests and scribes continued to hold respect and maintained their privileged positions in society, while temple complexes remained vital centers of religious and cultural life. Thanks to the peaceful policies of their rule, Babylon was able to exist relatively undisturbed for nearly 100 years. This period is considered one of the most stable in the city's history after the tumultuous events following Hammurabi's reign. However, the stability of the Kassite dynasty couldn't restore Babylon's former political might. The city lost its status as a major center, becoming just one of the provinces in the complex world of Mesopotamia. Nevertheless, even in political decline, Babylon remained a cultural hub. During this time, Babylonian scholars and priests not only preserved ancient knowledge from Sumerian and Akkadian texts, but also enriched it by systematizing and rewriting remaining documents. Babylon became an essential scientific center, home to libraries and archives, and its cultural influence continued to be highly valued in the inter-riverine region. The Kassite rule, which provided Babylon with relative stability and opportunities for cultural revival, couldn't last forever. By around 1155 BCE, the Kassite dynasty began losing its grip on Babylon. This led to a period of internal instability as Assyria emerged on the political scene of the inter-river region. The Assyrians, who spoke Akkadian and lived in the northern part of the region, actively sought to expand their territories by subjugating lands in southern Mesopotamia. Their state grew significantly, especially under such ruthless kings as Ashur-nasirpal II and Tiglath-Pileser II. The Assyrian army was known for its organization and brutality, quickly capturing new territories, and Babylon, a wealthy and strategically important city, attracted the attention of northern conquerors. Relations between Babylon and Assyria during this period were extremely volatile. Depending on the political situation, they could be allies or the Assyrian policy toward Babylon fluctuated between support and respect for its religion and brutal destruction. One of the most tragic examples was King Sennacherib's reign. In 689 BCE, after yet another uprising, he completely devastated Babylon, leaving it in ruins. These destructions severely weakened the city's economy and culture, leaving deep scars. However, Babylon consistently rebuilt itself, and Assyrian rulers had to acknowledge its vital role as the religious center of Mesopotamia. The worship of Marduk remained central to the region's religious life. Annual New Year celebrations, Akitu, became so significant that even Assyrian kings visited Babylon to affirm their power and gain symbolic approval from the gods. This highlighted the city's spiritual and political importance to all peoples of the region. The local priesthood played a crucial role in maintaining Babylon's religious status and preserving its cultural identity. Marduk's priests held high authority and often became spiritual leaders in resistance against Assyrian rule. Thanks to their efforts, Babylonians maintained a sense of unity and cultural pride, despite hardships and occupation. The priests participated in diplomatic negotiations and frequently acted as intermediaries between conquerors and locals, defending their community's interests. Nevertheless, despite Assyria's attempts to gain local support through religious involvement, discontent grew in Babylon over constant invasions, brutality, and high taxes. Babylonians repeatedly revolted against Assyrian dominance, seeking to reclaim their independence and greatness. The city's residents increasingly recognized the need for decisive action to secure their freedom, gathering strength and preparing for new uprisings. In such conditions, confrontation with Assyria inevitably led to a powerful revolt that would change Babylon's history and give the city a new chance to restore its former might. By the mid-6th century BCE, Babylonian patience ran out. The heavy and humiliating Assyrian rule, marked by high taxes and cruel punishments, sparked widespread discontent. This dissatisfaction soon escalated into open resistance. In 626 BCE, a man named Nabopolassar emerged as the leader of the uprising. He was a vigorous and capable leader who united various segments of Babylonian society. He proved to be not only a talented military commander, but also a skilled politician, able to inspire confidence in a successful outcome. Nabopolassar hailed from Babylonian nobility and enjoyed respect among locals and Marduk's priesthood, which hoped for his ability to restore Babylon's independence. From the outset of the uprising, He acted decisively and systematically, organizing local armed groups and securing support from a significant portion of the population, while also seeking aid from neighboring peoples suffering under Assyrian oppression. Soon the Chaldeans and Medes joined the Babylonian revolt, playing a crucial role in its success. Initially, Assyria, possessing the strongest army of the time, underestimated the threat from Babylon and its allies. However, it soon had to acknowledge that the uprising had escalated into a full-scale war, engulfing much of its southern territories. Nabopolassar brilliantly exploited Assyria's weakening, which faced internal political conflicts and economic troubles during this period, aiding the rebels' success. Reliance on ancient customs and the worship of Marduk became the foundation of the uprising. Priests supported the insurgents, convincing the people of divine assistance. Nabopolassar emphasized that his actions were inspired by Marduk's will, Babylon's main patron. The priests asserted that the god had turned away from the Assyrians and focused on his people once more. This religious legitimization of the uprising played a key role in uniting the people and inspiring warriors ready to fight a strong opponent. He besieged and conquered important cities and fortresses, gradually liberating Mesopotamia from Assyrian troops. As a result of successful military operations, he cleared Babylon's surroundings of enemies and began a major offensive into the northern regions previously under Assyrian control. By the end of his reign, Nabopolassar completely expelled the Assyrians and liberated Babylon and its vicinity from their rule. He not only restored his city's independence, but also laid the groundwork for a powerful state that would soon become one of the most significant and prosperous in ancient Near Eastern history. After defeating Assyria and restoring Babylon's independence, power in the city solidified under a new dynasty founded by Nabopolassar. However, Babylon's greatest flourishing was linked not to Nabopolassar himself, but to his son, whose name became renowned, Nebuchadnezzar II. He not only preserved and strengthened his father's achievements, but also transformed the Babylonian state into one of the most powerful and extensive empires of antiquity. Nebuchadnezzar II ascended the throne in the 6th century BCE, inheriting a stable and strong state from his father. However, his ambitions went beyond simply retaining power. The young king aimed to restore Babylon's glory and influence, reminiscent of the Hammurabi era. Unlike earlier times, Babylon now had real chances for significant conquests. Nebuchadnezzar dedicated his first years to strengthening central authority and organizing the army. He understood that a powerful military force, discipline, and good supply lines were essential for successful expansion. Soon after, a series of rapid and successful military campaigns began, greatly expanding state boundaries and bringing territories beyond Mesopotamia under Babylonian control. His primary targets were western regions and northern territories. He focused on the wealthy Levant and Canaan regions, which witnessed constant struggles among the major powers of that time. Nebuchadnezzar successfully conquered Syria, Phoenicia, and Judah, establishing control over vital trade routes and enhancing his influence in the Mediterranean. His actions against the Kingdom of Judah and its capital, Jerusalem, were particularly significant. The first siege of Jerusalem in 597 BCE ended with the capture of King Jeconiah and a significant portion of the nobility, as well as the installation of a king loyal to Babylon, Zedekiah. While Nebuchadnezzar also conducted military actions in eastern directions, major conquests against Elam and nearby regions occurred in earlier epochs of Mesopotamia. The king mainly focused on conquering western lands and countering Egypt, his primary rival for dominance in the Levant and North Africa. Thanks to his victories, Babylon inherited the role of the main power in the ancient Near East, previously held by the Assyrian Empire. Babylon now rivaled only Egypt, becoming the center of international politics and a key player in the region. Its influence stretched from the Mediterranean Sea in the west to the Persian Gulf in the east, turning the country into the largest power of that time. However, a significant feature of Nebuchadnezzar's conquests was not only their scale, but also the effective system of governance over the conquered peoples. The new king preferred a strict yet relatively fair policy. Conquered peoples who paid tribute and recognized Babylon's authority could keep their culture, language, and even religion. Nebuchadnezzar often appointed loyal local rulers to key positions in conquered lands, helping him maintain stability in the empire and avoid uprisings. Additionally, the vast territories he conquered became sources of wealth, ensuring Babylon's economic and cultural rise. Huge riches flowed into the city in the form of precious metals, ivory, rare woods, spices, and other exotic goods from all corners of the empire. Thus, through Nebuchadnezzar's determination, political wisdom, and military talents, Babylon reached its peak power and became a true center of the ancient world. His name became a symbol of greatness and strength, and his reign entered history as the Golden Age of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. During Nebuchadnezzar II's rule, both the empire and Babylon's religious life peaked. The cult of the supreme god Marduk gradually developed from the 7th century BCE, especially strengthening after Assyria's fall. However, it was under Nebuchadnezzar that Marduk's cult reached its maximum flourishing, solidifying his status as the supreme ruler of the world. The main cult center of Marduk became the Esagila temple. Important religious ceremonies, especially the Akitu festival, the chief celebration of the Mesopotamian New Year, took place around it. On this day, Marduk's statue was ceremonially taken out of the temple, and the king participated in a complex ritual to confirm his authority. Interestingly, the ceremony included the symbolic humiliation of the king. The high priest struck him in the face, and the king had to shed tears, demonstrating sincere repentance and submission to the will of the gods. If the king didn't show the proper humility, his power was considered threatened and could be unrecognized by both the people and the gods. However, Babylon's religious life also included other important deities. The goddess Ishtar held a special place among Mesopotamian gods. She was one of the most vibrant and powerful figures in Near Eastern mythology. Ishtar was revered as the goddess of love and fertility, as well as war, vengeance, and destruction. Her image embodied the duality of nature and life, where happiness and prosperity coexisted with violence and tragedy. Ishtar was famous for her intense sexuality, which found expression in myths and rituals. One of the central rituals of her cult was the sacred marriage, in which the king symbolically engaged in an intimate relationship with the high priestess, who was considered the living embodiment of the goddess. This ritual had a distinctly erotic character and symbolized the union of the goddess and her chosen one, ensuring the fertility of the land and the prosperity of the state. The ceremony took place in a solemn setting, accompanied by music and singing, and included ritual sex. In mythology, Ishtar often appeared as a passionate and jealous figure. The goddess's desires brought suffering and death to her lovers. A vivid example is the myth of Gilgamesh, where the goddess, overwhelmed by desire, tried to win the hero's heart. However, Gilgamesh, well aware of the fates of Ishtar's previous lovers, rejected her advances, fearing the tragic consequences of her passionate nature. Offended by the rejection, Ishtar, in her fury, turned to the supreme god Anu, demanding he send the heavenly bull to Gilgamesh and his city, a dreadful creature that brought destruction and numerous casualties. Many tales emphasize the goddess's fickleness and volatility. She easily betrayed her lovers, and when her passion faded, could ruthlessly abandon them or impose severe punishment. Her numerous lovers, both divine and mortal, often suffered from her jealousy and vengeance. The temple complexes and priests of Ishtar in Babylon functioned as not only spiritual centers, but also important economic and social institutions where trade thrived, amassing wealth. The priestesses of the goddess held high status as her patronage manifested through them. They frequently participated in rituals related to fertility and love, ensuring the city not only received the goddess's favor, but also her protection in the most mundane matters of urban life. According to one ancient Babylonian legend, Ishtar decided to descend into the underworld ruled by her elder sister, the stern goddess Ereshkigal. Ishtar sought power, aiming to extend her influence even into the realm of the dead. This journey, as the legend states, was extremely perilous. Ordinary mortals and even many gods do not return from the land of the dead. Before entering the underworld, Ishtar adorned herself with luxurious garments and jewels symbolizing her might. She approached the gates of the underworld, guarded by the stern gatekeeper Neti, who demanded she remove part of her attire or jewelry at each of the 7 gates. Ishtar agreed and gradually lost her splendor, the symbolic image of the solar chariot drawn by horses on which the god crossed the celestial sphere. Although this image wasn't as vivid as the Greek Helios, it remained an important element of mythology, emphasizing the movement of the sun and its eternal struggle against darkness. The main centers of worship for Shamash were the cities of Sippar and Larsa, where the largest temples dedicated to him stood. These temples became hubs of public life, where disputes were settled. While official court sessions were held by appointed judges, Shamash's priests often acted as arbitrators, affirming decisions in the name of the god. Shamash's image was inextricably linked to justice, and his temples were seen as places where law and truth reigned. In hymns and prayers dedicated to Shamash, his role as the protector of the oppressed and the poor was emphasized. People believed he always sided with those suffering from injustice. According to ancient texts, every morning, as he ascended through the heavens, Shamash illuminated the world, witnessing all human actions. Nothing could hide from his all-seeing eye, constantly reminding the Babylonians of the moral aspect of life and the inevitability of retribution for their deeds. Shamash's significance was also highlighted in legislation, as the famous stele of Hammurabi depicts Shamash presenting the king with a code of laws, symbolizing that laws and the power of rulers derive from him. His authority stems directly from the highest judicial power and the embodiment of truth. The influence of Shamash's image extended far beyond Babylonian and Mesopotamian cultures. Many aspects of his worship, especially his dual role as the sun deity and just judge, significantly impacted the religious beliefs of neighboring peoples. The symbolism and themes associated with this deity later reflected in ancient Hebrew texts and concepts, where God is also presented as an all-seeing judge and defender of the oppressed. Similar features of the sun god judge can be seen in later cultures, including the Iranian Mithras, venerated as the deity of light and truth. Another important deity in the Babylonian pantheon was Ea, also known as Eo or Enki in Sumerian tradition. This god was the patron of wisdom, knowledge, and fresh water. His image occupied a central place in Mesopotamian myths of the creation of the world and humanity, as well as in stories about how gods interacted with people, revealing secrets of crafts, magic, and knowledge in the broadest sense. Unlike most other gods, Ea wasn't harsh or cruel, but rather revered as a benefactor and protector of humanity. According to myths, he lived in the mythical freshwater ocean Apsu, the source of all earthly waters and fertility. From his underwater palace, he governed the underground rivers and lakes that nourished fields and gardens, providing the earth with fertility and prosperity. The water he controlled was not only a physical source of life, but also a symbol of knowledge and wisdom, allowing people to grasp the mysteries of the surrounding world. Ea was renowned for his outstanding wisdom and resourcefulness. In Babylonian myths, he often acted as a counselor and diplomat among the gods, helping them resolve disputes and conflicts peacefully. Many legends portray him as a god with exceptional intellect and eloquence, capable of persuading even the strictest and most stubborn deities to change their minds. Thus, he was often consulted by other gods for advice and assistance in difficult situations. Ea frequently opposed more cruel and harsh deities like Enlil, defending people from their wrath and softening harsh judgments they might pass on humanity. One of the most significant episodes associated with Ea became the myth of the Great Flood, which later entered the biblical story of Noah. In different versions of this ancient myth, various names for the hero appear. In the epic of Atrahasis, he is called Atrahasis. In the epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim, and in the biblical tradition, Noah. According to Mesopotamian versions, when the supreme gods decided to destroy humanity with a flood due to disobedience and bad behavior, it was Ea, moved by compassion, who resolved to save humankind. He secretly informed the chosen man about the impending disaster and advised building a ship, taking his family, animals, and plants with him. Thanks to Ea's wisdom and compassion, humanity was saved from complete destruction, highlighting his role as a benevolent protector of people. Moreover, he was the patron and giver of knowledge, magic, and various crafts. Contrary to popular belief, he didn't directly grant writing. That role belonged to the god Nabu. Nevertheless, he imparted the secrets of agriculture, construction, healing, and especially magical rituals, purifications with water, and spells against evil spirits and demons. His priests were known as skilled magicians, healers, and experts in purification rituals, and temples served as vital centers for magical ceremonies and cleansing rituals, playing a significant role in the daily lives of ancient Babylonians. The primary place of worship was the ancient city of Eridu, which housed the main temple of this god. This temple was regarded as the source of all wisdom and magical power of the deity, and attracted pilgrims from all around. Ea was depicted as a bearded, wise god, surrounded by streams of fresh water, and holding vessels from which rivers of knowledge and fertility flowed. His symbol was the mythical fish goat Suhurmasu, embodying Ea's dual nature as the Lord of Waters and wise mentor to humanity. This creature frequently appeared on temple reliefs, seals, and amulets, symbolizing protection, fertility, and wisdom emanating from the deity. In representations around the god, streams of water with swimming fish often highlighted his connection to the aquatic element. One of the central works in Babylonian mythology was the poem Enuma Elish, which translates as "When on High," marking the beginning of the text. Enuma Elish details the origin of the world, the gods, and humanity, while emphasizing the exceptional role of the supreme god Marduk. According to this epic poem, initially, there existed only two primordial deities, the freshwater ocean Apsu and his wife Tiamat, embodying salt water and primal chaos. From their union, the first generations of gods were born, soon filling the universe with noise and movement. However, Apsu and Tiamat were displeased with the unrest and noise from their offspring and planned to destroy the young gods to restore tranquility to the universe. But the wise and powerful god Ea uncovered Apsu's plans and, to protect the other gods, managed to neutralize the threat, putting Apsu into eternal sleep and then killing him. On the site of Apsu's body, Ea built his magnificent underwater palace, which became his permanent home. Tiamat, learning of her husband's demise, fell into a rage. Her fury was terrible and merciless. She resolved to take revenge on the young gods and began gathering a vast army of monsters and demons, preparing for a decisive battle. At the head of this army, Tiamat placed a mighty monster named Kingu, endowing him with supreme authority and handing him the tablets of fate, granting him the right to establish the laws of the universe. The young gods realized a deadly threat, and only one of them dared to accept the challenge. It was the god Marduk, known for his incredible strength, fearlessness, and wisdom. However, he agreed to battle Tiamat only on the condition that after his victory, the other gods would recognize him as the supreme and most powerful of all existing deities. The gods, consumed by fear of imminent destruction, unanimously accepted his terms and proclaimed him their leader. The epic battle between Marduk and Tiamat became one of the most magnificent and dramatic events in Mesopotamian mythology. Marduk entered the fight, armed with a bow, arrows, a net, and a mace, accompanied by storms and winds that obeyed him unconditionally. In this desperate battle, he managed to defeat Tiamat, accurately striking her with an arrow that split her massive body in two. After his glorious victory, Marduk began the act of creation, using the body of the defeated goddess. From one half of Tiamat's body, he created the heavens. From the other, he formed the earth, thereby establishing a new cosmic order and putting an end to primordial chaos. He set order in the universe, defining time, creating stars, the sun, and the moon, and assigning them clear positions and roles so they could measure time and distinguish days, months, and years. Then he captured the monster Kingu, stripping him of his powers. The tablets of fate that belonged to Kingu were handed to Enlil, but in reality, they affirmed Marduk's authority. From Kingu's blood, mixed with clay, Marduk created the first humans. Since Kingu was the leader of chaos, humanity bore the symbolic guilt for rebelling against the gods. Humans were created to serve the gods, perform hard labor, and atone for their nature and original sin, allowing the gods to rest and enjoy honor. This poem played a crucial role in Babylonian culture. It was read aloud annually during the Akitu festival, emphasizing Marduk's religious significance and his importance in the city's life. Thus, the myth of Marduk's victory over Tiamat became a symbol of order, triumphing over chaos, strength over weakness, and divine law over primal anarchy. For the people of Babylon, it symbolized not only the tale of the world's origin, but also moral and spiritual guidelines, highlighting the importance of adhering to the laws of the universe and respecting the hierarchy established by higher powers. A significant part of ancient Babylonians' religious beliefs involved rituals, particularly sacrifices. It was believed that the gods needed regular offerings to maintain harmony between humans and divine forces. Sacrifices were seen as fulfilling human obligations to the gods. People honored and fed the gods, and in return, the gods granted protection, prosperity, and fertility. The most common form of sacrifice was daily offerings, brought to all major temples and shrines. These offerings consisted of simple but symbolically significant items: freshly baked bread, meat, beer, and various incense. Bread and beer served as the most ordinary offerings, symbolizing fertility, abundance, and human labor. Wine was much rarer and a costly imported product, so it was offered to the gods only on special occasions or important rituals. Incense was a necessary element of sacrifices, as the smoke from burning incense was considered food for the gods. It symbolically carried human prayers to the heavens and bestowed upon the gods a sense of reverence. In addition to everyday offerings, more significant sacrifices in the form of animals were regularly made. Most often, sheep, bulls, and various types of birds were offered. The sacrificial animals had to be flawless, healthy, and robust. In major temples, dozens of animals, specifically raised for these rituals, were brought daily. Particularly large sacrifices were held during major festivals, such as the New Year Akitu celebration. On these days, many loaves of bread, fruits, and beer were also offered. The ritual itself was accompanied by prayers, hymns, and solemn ceremonies, with part of the offered meat consumed by the priests, symbolizing the unity of people and gods. Despite the regularity of sacrifices, during times of crisis, such as catastrophic defeats in wars, prolonged droughts, or epidemics, the Babylonians might resort to more extreme measures. In rare cases, deep influences affected the perception and assessment of ancient Babylon by its contemporaries. One of the most famous and enigmatic structures of this city was the impressive ziggurat known as Etemenanki, which became a symbol of the grandeur and power of the Babylonian state. This majestic step temple, built in honor of the supreme god Marduk, embodied the order and authority of the universe. The name of the ziggurat translates to the house where heaven and earth meet, highlighting its significance in cosmological beliefs. The structure consisted of 7 tiers, each smaller than the one below. At the very top was a sanctuary, accessible only to priests and the king himself. According to ancient authors, the height of this building exceeded 90 meters, making it a unique engineering achievement of its time. Contrary to popular belief, studies do not confirm that every brick of the ziggurat was glazed. Most likely, glazed elements were used only to decorate the most significant parts of the building. Besides its religious function, the ziggurat also held important astronomical significance. From its upper levels, priests observed the starry sky, recording the movements of celestial bodies and creating calendars that were then used to determine the timing of festivals and agricultural cycles. While calling the ziggurat a full-fledged observatory isn't entirely accurate, its upper levels did allow for systematic astronomical observations. Another mysterious and romantic structure of ancient Babylon was the famous Hanging Gardens, later known as the Gardens of Semiramis. This astonishing creation was so impressive and unique that it subsequently became one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Modern historians and archaeologists still debate whether these gardens actually existed or were merely a product of imagination. According to one popular version, the Hanging Gardens were built in honor of Queen Amytis, the wife of Nebuchadnezzar II. However, the name Amytis is known only from later sources, and no documents confirming her existence in Babylon have been found. Nevertheless, there exists a legend that the queen hailed from the mountainous region of Media, where nature was abundant. Babylon, surrounded by desert expanses, seemed dreary to her, and she began to long for her homeland. To comfort his beloved, the king ordered the creation of gardens that reminded her of her native mountains, lush with greenery and flowers. According to ancient descriptions, these gardens were a multi-tiered structure resembling a stepped pyramid. Each level was fortified and protected from moisture so that the soil wouldn't seep down. Fertile soil was piled on each level, where trees, flowers, and exotic plants collected from around the world were planted. The gardens were designed so that from below it appeared as if the plants floated in the air. That's why they were called hanging gardens. One of the remarkable achievements of their builders was a complex irrigation system that allowed them to maintain a green and blooming appearance. Gardens in the hot climate of Mesopotamia. According to ancient sources, water was supplied to the upper levels using mechanisms, likely chain pumps or water wheels driven by animals or human labor. Water flowed downward, creating a coolness reminiscent of mountain streams. Descriptions of these gardens can be found in various ancient authors, including Diodorus and Strabo, who described them as an astonishing sight, even for the most experienced travelers. The Greeks referred to these magnificent gardens with a word that eventually gave rise to the modern concept of paradise. Ancient writers mentioned tall trees, blooming avenues, and shady corners that created a sense of paradise in the desert. However, despite numerous descriptions, archaeologists have yet to find convincing evidence of such gardens in Babylon, leading to various hypotheses and theories among historians. One of the most compelling modern theories suggests that the Hanging Gardens might have been located in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, created under the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Later, during the Hellenistic era, the Greeks might have confused Assyrian gardens with Babylonian ones. The name of Semiramis, associated with these gardens, also doesn't relate to the time of Nebuchadnezzar II, but rather to a legendary Assyrian queen who lived long before him. Thus, this name likely became associated with the gardens due to romantic descriptions created later. Even if the Hanging Gardens existed, they were probably part of a large palace complex. Babylon's achievements were exceptional, not only in architecture, but also in science, which played a key role in the development of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. Babylonians made significant advances in astronomy, mathematics, writing, and the systematization of knowledge. making their legacy unique and valuable for future cultures. Astronomy held an important place in Babylon's intellectual life. The city's priests were masters at observing celestial phenomena. From the heights of temples and upper terraces, they meticulously tracked the movements of stars, the moon, and planets, recording their observations on clay tablets. They didn't just observe, they also developed mathematical models to predict celestial events. For instance, Babylonians successfully predicted solar and lunar eclipses, discovering the Saros cycle, which lasts 18 years and 11 days, after which eclipses repeat with high accuracy. In Babylon, the systematic organization of astrological predictions began, merging astronomy and religion into one discipline. The zodiac in its completed form was established in late Babylon, around the 5th century BCE, thanks to Chaldean astronomers, although individual constellations and their observations existed much earlier. Equally impressive were the achievements of the Babylonians in mathematics. Mathematics in Babylon was closely tied to practical needs like trade, construction, and astronomy, yet it was surprisingly advanced and could be considered theoretical for its time. Babylonians used a unique sexagesimal numeral system, which gave rise to many new mathematical concepts. Time, as we know it, divides into 60 minutes per hour and minutes into 60 seconds. This system traces back to Babylonian mathematicians who tackled complex problems, calculated areas and volumes of various shapes, determined proportions and percentages, and worked on problems resembling early algebraic equations. Their mathematical methods were recorded on numerous clay tablets that survive to this day, astonishing us with their accuracy and depth of analysis. Libraries and archives of Babylon played a key role in preserving and disseminating scientific and cultural knowledge. These institutions were true repositories of information, systematically collecting documents on a wide range of topics, from religious texts and laws to scientific tables and literary works. Although the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, discovered in Nineveh, gained the most fame, Babylon also had vast collections containing thousands of tablets with astronomical and mathematical calculations, as well as business records. The clay tablets, on which this knowledge was recorded, turned out to be truly eternal books. Unlike papyrus and parchment, which deteriorate over time, clay preserved for millennia. Thanks to these tablets, we can deeply study the achievements and characteristics of Babylonian civilization. Babylon's influence on subsequent cultures was significant. Through ancient Greek scholars, particularly the famous astronomer Ptolemy, Babylonian knowledge in astronomy and mathematics penetrated European science, laying the groundwork for its future development. Now, let's return to history, where dramatic events await us. In 586 BCE, an event occurred in the heart of the ancient Near East that changed the destiny of an entire people. We speak of the Babylonian captivity of the Jews, a tragic episode that profoundly influenced the entire subsequent history and religious views of the Jewish people. As mentioned earlier, after the first capture of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 587 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar appointed his puppet Zedekiah to the Jewish throne, expecting complete loyalty. However, King Zedekiah didn't meet those expectations and soon attempted to revolt against Babylon, hoping for support from Egypt. This uprising led to even more severe consequences. In 586 BCE, Babylonian troops besieged Jerusalem, and the siege lasted over a year. Ultimately, in 586 BCE, the city fell after fierce battles. Nebuchadnezzar decided to severely punish the rebels, crushing the resistance once and for all. Babylon's influence significantly waned during the reigns of monarchs like Darius III and Xerxes, leading to a decline in its political role. Key decisions were made not in Babylon, but in Persepolis, Susa, and Ecbatana, where administrative and economic centers gradually shifted. After Babylon joined the Persian Empire, it continued to lose its former glory. Nevertheless, the history of this ancient city regained its luster in the 3rd century BCE, when the great conqueror Alexander the Great arrived in 331 BCE. He was enchanted by the legends and grandeur of Babylon, choosing it for his eastern residence. For Alexander, this city represented not just a strategically important point, but also a symbol that could confirm his status as a successor to the great kings of Mesopotamia. He aimed to make Babylon the capital of his empire, uniting the cultures of East and West, and planned extensive restoration work, primarily on the ziggurat and the Temple of Marduk. However, despite his grand intentions, he accomplished almost nothing of what he had envisioned. In 323 BCE, at the height of his powers, he suddenly died in Babylon, which shattered his ambitious plans to revive the city. After his death, the vast empire was divided among his generals, known as the Diadochi. Especially the rulers of the Seleucid dynasty quickly shifted the center of power to a new city, Seleucia, founded for this purpose, which dealt a fatal blow to Babylon. Over time, Ctesiphon became the main center of the region. The relocation of key trade, the development of trade routes and administrative centers in these new cities led to the final decline of Babylon, which lost its economic significance. Gradually, the city began to empty as residents left in search of better living conditions. Majestic buildings crumbled over time and neglect. By the 3rd century BCE, Babylon looked like a sad spectacle, though small settlements still existed among its ruins. Complete destruction and the final relocation of the last inhabitants occurred in the 1st century CE. Roman travelers and historians like Strabo and Pliny the Elder describe Babylon as a mournful ruin that evoked more sorrow than admiration. The great city, once the subject of legends, became a silent reminder of human grandeur's transience. Since then, ancient Babylon has symbolized both greatness and decline, splendor and destruction, strength and weakness of human civilization. Its legends and achievements continue to inspire and fascinate, reminding us how easily powerful empires and great cities can vanish, leaving only memories and lessons of history.